Hello guys, welcome to another book recommendation video. Today we're going to take a look at Nassim Taleb. We're going to take a look at all of his books. He's one of my favorite contemporary authors. And I hope that I can make it come across why that is. All of his books have a central theme centered on how randomness, hidden from view, usually affects our lives and our society around us without us knowing it and what we can do about it. And all of his books sort of builds on the previous books until he gets to the end in Antifragile, and it becomes his sort of master thesis. So the first book he wrote is this one, Fooled by Randomness. The hidden role of chance in life and in the markets. And the second book he wrote is Black Swan. And this book is credited with foreseeing the market crash in 2008. Taleb was a trader before he became an author, and his books are very inspired by the financial markets and stuff like that. Then he wrote this book, The Bed of Procrustes, which is a book of aphorisms. And the latest book, Antifragile, is a term that he invented himself, which is the opposite of fragile, and how we can become that. Strive to create stuff that is anti-fragile. That means benefit from disorder and randomness. So let's start at the beginning. Fooled by Randomness. That's the first book you should read if you want to pick up any of Taleb's books. So why are some people successful and others not so much? Is it all skill, or is there a big degree of randomness in it, also known as luck? Take for example a person who goes to the casino. Let's say he goes there and he bets everything on black, all he owns. And he wins and he's happy about that, so he goes back, and the year after he goes back to the casino because that was fun the last time, and he bets everything on red and he wins. Now he's got double the money. He's loving this casino thing, it's great. Comes back the third year, bets everything on red again and he wins. And now he's actually a very wealthy man. And he's starting to think that he's pretty good at this casino business. He knows how to play the roulette. Comes back again the fourth year. He bets everything on black and he wins again. And now people are starting to notice him, and he's getting smiles from the girls, and he bought a new car and a big house. So he goes back to his home and he contemplates how good he is at betting on the roulette, and he goes back to the casino. He bets again and he wins again, and now he gets called up by the local newspaper. They want to know how he's doing it. What's his secret formula for success? So now he's getting a lot of recognition of his skills, which we all know are completely random. He has no skills at all. And he starts to think how he can play the roulette and and he notices how it slants a little bit to the right, and maybe he should play on red because that's the right thing to do. He's certain of it. He's certain of his skill. He goes back, he plays again, he wins. So now he's landed on the front page of Fortune magazine. And he's absolutely certain that he is incredibly skilled at playing the casino. So the 9th year, he goes back. But before he goes back, he goes to the bank and he just borrows everything he can. Certain of his skills, now he's back at the casino and he bets everything on black and he wins again. So now he's really rich, really happy, and he's enjoying life, and he's driving around in his Lamborghini and everybody's envious. So he goes back to the casino, he bets everything on red, and now he loses. He's bankrupt, he lost all the money he owes to the bank, he has no money, it's fucked up. He realizes he was just lucky. So that can happen in the financial markets because there's a large degree of randomness. If 1 million people started playing the casino, maybe 1, 2 or 3 of them would have a run like that. And the rest of course would go broke long before, but you would never hear about those. Nobody's going to write books about them or ask them how they played the casino. Now, of course, it's not like this for everyone. If you're a cook, you're probably skilled if you create a good meal. It's not that much randomness in that. We also have a bias, a mental bias that tells us that if we do well, if we're successful, it's because we are skillful. It's because we deserve it. It's because we know what we're doing. But if for some reason we fail or are unsuccessful, we tell ourselves that it was random, we were just unlucky. And you see this all of the time. It sort of manifests itself also in the narrative fallacy that Taleb describes as we fit events and occurrences in hindsight to where we are now. So if you ask somebody how he became successful, he'll tell you a story And he'll tell you, I did this and I did that, and then this happened and all that, and and it'll all be attributed to his skills and how he is as a person and all that bullshit. He might just have been lucky, or he might have had a good mixture of both. But the article is certain to focus on how he got there and tell a story, because we like stories, and our mind likes stories. That's how we function. So that's Fooled by Randomness. That's where you would start, because Nicholas Taleb is all about probability and how it affects us. And the next book he wrote is The Black Swan. And this book is all about how some events happen that are highly improbable but have a huge impact. Like, as an example, a market crash in 2008, the housing bubble with all of the bad loans. And to sort of illustrate that, he has a Turkey example. It also illustrates why economists can't forecast or do models that'll estimate anything about the future at all, or market crashes, or whether the market will go up or down. They can't say anything about it. So once upon a time, there was a bunch of turkeys, and they had a friend, the butcher, and the butcher gave them food every day. And the turkeys loved the butcher, and they knew that the butcher loved the turkeys because he gave them food every day. And every day they got food, and every day that passed, they were more statistically certain that butchers loves turkeys. And that certainty just increased every day that passed, until a certain day in the year arrived, Thanksgiving, and all of the turkeys were slaughtered. There was a Black Swan day, Black Swan event for the turkeys. So a Black Swan event is something improbable happening, and it'll have a huge impact on everyone around. Like a market crash, for instance. So a lot of the book is really beating on economists and letting them know that they're charlatans. And actually Nicholas Taleb is quite arrogant in some of his writing, but don't let that deter you. There's a lot of wisdom in the books, and a lot of his stuff is centered on financial markets and investing, because that's his natural habitat. You could also describe him as a philosopher by now. Then he wrote The Bed of Procrustes, how we sort of make things fit into our own theories. And Procrustes is, I think it is a Greek story about an innkeeper that had travelers coming to his inn, and every time he would make the travelers fit his bed. He would stretch them or cut off their legs so they fit perfectly in his bed. And he would do that to all of the travelers. So it's sort of a horror story, but it's also sort of what we do a little bit with science these days, or our theories. We make the circumstances and facts fit into them, even if we have to cut off the legs, in statistics and models and what have you. And this is a book of aphorisms, which is kind of odd, because aphorisms is usually something that is compiled after you die by someone else than yourself. But Talebs wrote this book himself. His last book is Antifragile, which I think is the best book, and it's sort of his master thesis, really. So he invented this term, antifragile, and it's to illustrate the opposite of fragile. So say, for example, a glass is fragile. If you drop it, it breaks and shatters. If it's subjected to stressors or to disorder, it will break. A rock is not the opposite, because it doesn't gain from disorder or benefit from it. It's just unharmed. It's robust. If you drop a rock, nothing happens to it, right? At least to a certain degree. And the opposite would then be antifragile. It would be something that gains from disorder and randomness and benefits from it. It gets stronger. So what's antifragile? Well, nature is. What happens if you build a house and you let it stand there for 50 years? It'll be covered in all kinds of nature things and broken down. Same thing with evolution. Some stuff dies off, but something stronger grows back. What happens if you go to the gym and train a muscle? If you train your bicep, you subject it to a lot of stressors. And obviously it's to a point. If you can also break the biceps. But if you subject it to stress, it'll overcompensate and grow back even stronger, because you've broken down some of it. So it's antifragile. So what's fragile in the modern world? Huge institutions. The larger they are, the more fragile they also are, because the more costly the mistakes will be as relative to a small organization. where mistakes will be small. A mistake made on a national level, like a war as an example, can be a colossal mistake with huge ramifications. Whereas if you make a mistake in a municipality, it's not going to be that bad. So that's fragile. So what else is fragile in the world? Well, debt. If you have tons of debt, let's say you have a car loan and you have a mortgage on your house and you have a credit card debt, then you are highly fragile if it eats up a lot of your income and you don't have a lot of cash on hand. If a black swan event comes, let's say the market crashes and you get fired, you're going to hurt a lot when you have to move out of the house, hand back the car, and you're left with no income and a huge debt that keeps increasing because of interest. So what's robust? Well, if you have no debt, I guess, you're not going to be hurt that much by getting fired, because all you lose is the income, you don't have all of the other negative effects. Well, what's anti-fragile then? Let's think if you have maybe a lot of cash on hand and no debt at all, and now the black swan market event crashes, a lot of people loses their jobs, have to sell their cars and their houses, but you have tons of cash and no debt, so you can buy a house on the cheap, you can buy a luxury car for almost nothing if you want, you can pick up stocks at historically low prices, so now you're anti-fragile all of a sudden. And another thing that Taleb notes is that if you have a stock portfolio that you check on a daily basis or even weekly basis, you're not doing a good thing for yourself, because even if at the end of the year you've made 6% on it, all of the variations going like this, every time you check and it's down, you will be affected 2.5 times more with sorrow and frustration than you'll be happy at getting a little increase in value of your portfolio. So all of that sums up to a lot more sorrow and unhappiness, because it's a factor 2.5. We are hurt a lot more by loss. You'll be a lot more sad to lose $1,000 than you would to gain $1,000. So you'll come out at a mental deficit at the end of the year from checking all of the time because of the variance of your portfolio, even though your sum total, you made a profit of 6%. Well, that's the same thing with a YouTube channel. If you keep checking your subscribers, you'll be hurt a lot more by losing 2 subscribers than you'll be happy at gaining 2. So same thing will happen. You'll be more frustrated than you'll be happy from checking it all of the time. Unless, of course, it's always going up, which usually it's not. Now, in Antifragile, Taleb also looks at many other things like medicine. Doctors like to prescribe medicine for just about everything. If you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And a lot of time, medicine doesn't take into account the side effects that might be negative and outweigh the actual small benefit that you get from medication. So he takes a look at that and the probabilities and statistics, and how the doctors are not really very good at figuring this out. And he looks at many other aspects of life. He's very broad in applying his theories to everything. And he rails a lot against economists and everyone who tries to plan and forecast and interfere with markets and politics. So those are the books. The best place to start is Fooled by Randomness, which is also the one that's most applicable probably to your everyday life and why your neighbor might be more successful than you. And then The Black Swan, about the highly improbable events that has a huge impact. And then his aphorisms book, and then Antifragile, the sort of conclusion to everything. Another example that he has in Antifragile is the fact that the human engineers are not very good at building in redundancies into things as safety. If you take the body as an example, you have 2 kidneys and 2 lungs. Nature builds in tons of redundancy in its systems to be safe. But if we build a nuclear power plant, we just plan for whatever earthquakes and stuff that has been in the past. And of course, the past is not a very good predictor of the future. So what we should build is something that can withstand much, much, much more than has been in the past. And he mentions how Hammurabi, the ancient Babylonian king, he had a law that said that the engineer that builds a house, if that house collapses and kills anybody, that engineer should be put to death. So that really made that engineer build in some redundancies and some safeguards, because his life was at stake. And that's another thing that Nicholas Taleb is all about, is skin in the game, he calls it. Those who make the decisions should have skin in the game. Obviously, if you're an investment banker, you don't have skin in the game if you're getting bailed out by the state. if something goes wrong, but you're still getting all of the money. There's an asymmetry there between risk and reward. And the same thing could go if you're the American president and you decide to go to war, but you don't have any sons that will actually go to war and might be at the risk of death. Then you don't really have skin in the game in the same way. So that's one of his main things, is getting parity between risk and reward in everything. To have better political systems. Not in the extreme way that I just described with these examples, but some other measures. Alright guys, that's the books from Nicholas Taleb. I'll put all of the links in the description. Let me know what you think of this video or the books or Nicholas Taleb or anything else you want in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.